So to lunge Alki, I've put on his brushing boots, again to protect his cannon bones from any shin splints if he was to cross his legs over and knock them with his hoof. His bell boots are on to protect him from any overreaching. If he does do a bigger trot and he does collect his front heels with his back hoofs. Just fit the saddle as normal like I did in the prior video. The only different thing is here, because when he's lunging, I don't want his stirrups to be flapping against his side and making him uncomfortable or frightened. And that would be really important for a young horse too, because they might not know what stirrups are. You can either remove the stirrups altogether or just roll them like so. And then you can even fasten the stirrup down flat against the saddle by putting that strap through there like that. So I'll just do the other side. Now this is obviously if you were just lunging the horse for the sake of exercise, if you weren't doing a lunge lesson with a student. For a lunge lesson with the student, obviously the stirrups would need to be down and at the correct length for the student. And it's also really important when you're lunging a horse that you wear your gloves to protect your hands from any rope burns if the horse were to get a fright and spook and take off or something like that. You don't want any blisters. Enclosed shoes are really important as well, in case the horse were to stand on your feet. You want your lunge rein to be nicely looped in even circles, not too small or too long. If they're too long, you run the risk of standing and tripping on them. Too short, you have the risk if the horse were to take off, you haven't got enough time to release it to allow any rein out, and your hand potentially could get caught up in it. Also, you don't want there to be any knots in your lunge rein at all. You want it to be nice and organised. You don't want there to be any splits or anything where you potentially it might break or you could pinch your hands in them. I lunge Alki just in this cavesson. And just to demonstrate one of your comments from a previous video too, just if Alki were a young horse or I were more of a beginner, you can place the halter just around their neck there, just to keep them secure. Now with the cavesson, you don't want it too loose that if you were to tug on this side that it would slip and potentially hurt the top of their nose here, but you also don't want it too tight either that it's quite restricting. So that's nice there. You have to be careful when fitting these too. You've got to run your fingers down their nostrils and you reach a point where that becomes cartilage and you can feel the nostril cavity begin. So you don't want the cavesson blocking the nostril cavity because it'll inhibit the breathing. So just there's right. And you want to make sure this is really pulling that away from the horse's eye, so it's not rubbing on the horse's eye. So just on the top one here. Good boy. Now I'll just release the halter. Perfect. And I'll just be using this lunge whip here. You've got to be really careful with the lunge whips when you're approaching the horse that you don't accidentally get them in the eye with it. Just be aware of where it is. Tell me anything now?
Mm-hmm.
So just stand on my right side, a little bit behind me. Yep. So when you start lunging the horse, it's really important that they know not to take off away from you, because if you had a student on, you don't want them to be moving quickly in sideways actions or anything like that. So always be nice and calm with this first initial movement away from you. It's really important that you're not taking step backwards, because that's going to draw the horse towards you, and you want to be achieving the opposite. You want them to be moving their shoulders out and away from you. So just with the whip like this, guide their shoulders out, and you keep stepping forward and you ask them away from you. You can raise your left hand slightly just to encourage that outward movement. Now with the lunge rein and the whip, you create a triangle with the body of the horse. And I'll keep encouraging him to go out into a larger circle. Alfie's been taught that if you point slightly at the shoulder, he'll go a bit further out. A lowered whip means that you don't want any more forward, or you don't want more activity. Raising the whip should encourage more forward activity. And again, you just cross your legs over one in front of the other. Don't be taking backward steps or stepping behind yourself, because you could trip over. And you don't want too much slack in your lunge rein either. You want it to be reasonably firm. Ideally more contact than there is right now would be good, but just as he's walking, that's a little bit difficult to achieve. Walk on. Right, if you want to go out, and I'll trot and canter him. Walk on. Trot, trot. Trot, trot. Trot on. Trot, trot. And hold. And hold. Hold. Good boy. So again, if you are lunging a student, it's really, really important that the horse holds square, so that they're learning how to hold square on the circle and not have the horse turn into you. Now as I come and get Alfie, I should walk out in front of him. And now that he's come off the circle like that, I just want to encourage him to come back onto the circle, just to remind him. And now I'll ask him out again, nice and slowly. Out. Good boy. Trot, trot. Trot on. Trot, trot. Canter. Canter. Come on. Canter. Good boy. Up. Canter. Canter. And trot, trot. Trot, trot. Good boy. And walk on. Pull. And pull. of rein. I'll put my whip under my left arm as to keep the whip away from the horse's eye when I get closer to him. And I'll loop the rein in like so. I'll then swap the reins over to my right hand, receive the whip with my left hand, and then ask him across. Good boy. And trot, trot. Good boy. And hands up. Hands up. Come on. Up. Hands up. Good boy. Hands up. Up. And trot, trot. Trot, trot. And forward. Walk on. And hold. Hold, hold. Hold, hold. Good boy.
You might need to find your page in your book.
Oh, nah, I think I can remember anyway. So, obviously some just safety considerations when lunging a horse is the area you do it in. If Alki were a bit of a younger horse, or if I had a student on, I'd probably choose an end of the arena to lunge him in, just because it gives us a little bit more enclosure. Obviously, lunge yards and like round yards are really, really good because they're perfectly enclosed for lunging. Obviously, not every horse would be suitable to have a lunge lesson with a student on. If they were young, weren't good with the aids, or had a tendency to just take off randomly or something like that. And obviously, you got to be really aware of your rope. You don't want to be tripping in it. You don't want it looping around your hands at all. And you don't want the horse to learn how to like walk on top of you. You always got to make sure you're enforcing that step away from my space when you're working with them, because they are really big animals. I guess what lunging's really handy for is if you are just using lunging as a training activity or something for your horse. It's a great way to examine their body, see how they're working. If they learn to stretch when they're lunging, it really does stretch their top line nicely. And then you can start implementing all types of in-hand work, like stepping away from like haunches in, haunches out. You can implement shoulder in, travers, start doing some piaffe, all of those kind of movements. But for the sake of having a rider lesson with lunging, it really can help the rider's position. So you take the reins off of them, you can take your stirrups away if they've got the balance there for it, and you can really let them focus on how they're holding their shoulders, how their lower legs sitting, their seat, everything like that. And it allows the instructor to really focus in on that too, because they have got control of the horse. And it can help younger riders and beginners get a lot more confidence too, because they don't feel like they're out there by themselves having to turn and control the horse, because you can help them with all of those things. I'll just quickly check that I covered everything. I don't know. Do you want to find it so I can hold the horse? Oh, there it is. Potential hazards, safe practices. No, I think that's all good.
And just the principles of lunging. Explain the principle.
Yeah,
Oh, you've done
just
that.
did that.
Beautiful. Cool.
Cool. Thank you.